Good afternoon and welcome to the Medical Student Panel. My name is Varsha Solanke and I'm a coordinator of Med Programming and Nursing. This panel consists of both traditional and non-traditional medical students. I would like to ask our medical students to please introduce themselves and say which year and which medical school they're attending, as well as which undergraduate institutions they attended. Could we please start with you?
Sure. Okay, I guess everybody can hear me. My name's Joburg Poblete, and I'm a first-year medical student at UCSF, and I'm a non-traditional student. I actually graduated in 2007 from UC Berkeley, and I studied social science and city planning, and actually went and worked in a completely different field. I had a pretty intense job in the labor movement that I worked at for several years, and then I decided that wasn't really for me and that I wanted something different, and decided on, kind of started exploring health and healthcare, and decided that medicine would be a really great fit for me. And I did a post-baccalaureate program at UC Berkeley Extension 2 to get my pre-med requirements.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Hsu, and I went to the U.S. Naval Academy for my undergraduate back in 1993, so I'm non-traditional as well. But lest you think that we're all non-traditional, my classmates, average age, we all are about 24 years old on average. My youngest classmate is 19 years old, and I'm the oldest classmate at 41 years old. Served a full career in the military, and some of my experiences were with tsunami relief back in 2005, and that's what inspired me to pursue this career in medicine, this vocation in medicine.
Hi everyone, my name is Shay. I'm a fourth year here at UC Davis. I'm pretty traditional as they go. I graduated from Berkeley in 2009. I actually applied my senior year, but then my mom fell ill during that year, so I actually deferred my admission until the year after joining Olivia in the class of 2014. But I guess technically I'm considered a traditional student. Nice to meet all of you.
Hello. My name is Olivia Compa. I am also a fourth-year medical student at UC Davis School of Medicine. I am a non-traditional student. I took 4 years between undergraduate and medical school to do clinical research. And during that time, got some publications, which was pretty helpful in helping me get into medical school. For undergraduate, I went to Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, and plan on doing internal medicine, primary care, and geriatric fellowship, along with health services research as a career.
My name is Rose Diaz. I'm a non-traditional student. I actually graduated from college, also from Loyola Marymount, in 1990. I was a teacher for 10 years, and the desire to be a doctor just never left me. So I went back to school, and I did all of my prerequisites at a community college. And after not doing so well the first attempt at an MCAT, I ended up going back to school and getting my master's from Cal State LA in organic chemistry. So I'm 41 now, and definitely anxious and open to answering questions about a non-traditional route. Oh, and I'm sorry, let me also mention that I'm the mother of 3 teenagers, so I'm also a mom in med school.
This first question is for Ms. Diaz and Mr. Poblete. How did you choose your current medical school?
I think that your application makes your medical school choose you as much as you choose them. The best advice that someone told me was to apply broadly. So you want to research the schools that you're applying to and apply to schools that you would go to if they accepted you. I love where I landed up because during my interview process, a parent came up to me and talked a lot about how this was one of the great schools to balance family and med school life. And so I think that you research the schools, but then they also pick from the applications what they're looking for. I expressed a big desire to go back and practice medicine in my community and work with underserved communities. So I think that in my application also had them choose me back.
And for me, I took a very systematic approach, actually, and it just changes. So I researched the different schools, and I actually came up with a short list and then tried to come up with 3 reasons why I wanted to go to each school, and if I couldn't come up with 3, I took it off. But then that all changes when you actually visit the schools. I think when you go, you meet people, and you just get a lot of information about whether it fits for you. I love UCSF. I feel like the other students are sort of at the same register as me. I feel like a lot of us care about the same things. We're all in the same kind of. Everybody's very extroverted, which isn't for everyone, you know. I think, like, I remember in our accepted students weekend, there were some people who were a little bit more introverted, and you could tell they were kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? And I think each school, each class has its own culture, and you kind of, when you're going to interviews and you're going to a lot of these activities, you're really trying to see whether you're going to fit into that culture. And I love the Bay Area, so, and I'm from Oakland, so it was also a no-brainer that I would get to stay in the Bay Area.
This next question is for Mr. Shay and Ms. Compa. What unique experiences do you believe set you apart from other applicants? For example, research, traveling abroad, or community service?
So I'm a first-generation college graduate. I think it's a pretty unique experience to be the first person in your family to graduate college and also be the first person in your family to become a physician. Other things that I think were helpful in the admissions process for me was my research background. So because I had to work through undergraduate, I worked a pretty broad range of jobs and ended up as a filer at UCLA. And then they needed some extra help in one of the research studies and asked me if I could help. I ended up becoming a pretty large part of that study, which is one of the largest funded studies ever in the history of this country, none of which I had any clue I was walking into. So I think a lot of that was just pretty much luck and kind of being in the right place at the right time, and it turned into a great opportunity and a pretty unique opportunity for me. So I think the kind of 2 things that really stood out in my application was my diverse perspective because of my diverse background, and then also my broad research experience because of some of the opportunities I had as a result of my diverse background.
That's actually really awesome. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm a very traditional student, and so I think what initially set me apart were really just numbers. I take tests really well. But otherwise, I did do a lot of research when I was in undergrad, and I think my publications were able to help me. I didn't really have that much time to do other things that a lot of these really cool experiences that our fellow panelists had time to do. But I did do a lot of research, and I think that really set me apart. But no, I think an advice I would give is that any experience that you do should be really meaningful to you, and if it is, it will show up on your application. And even if your numbers aren't great, a lot of schools don't only look at that, and so that's something to keep in mind.
This question is for Commander Shu. Could you please elaborate on why you decided to go to medical school later in life?
It's actually partially a question of opportunity. By the time I was exposed to medicine in a meaningful way, I already had incurred a 10-year obligation in the Navy. So I went ahead and fulfilled that obligation to the best of my ability while also keeping my eye on the ball, which was eventually going to medical school. And once I had the opportunity, I started taking prerequisites at my local university while also working full-time and volunteering and shadowing. And I wasn't 100% sure that I wanted to go into medicine, but after the volunteering and the shadowing opportunities, they just reinforced that inclination I had to go into medicine afterwards. So it was a late decision in life, but one that I'm so far very happy with.
This next question is for Mr. Shay. Do you feel you had an advantage or disadvantage by being a traditional student, and would you recommend taking a year off?
So I ended up actually taking a year off, but that was not by choice. I wouldn't say there's any advantage or disadvantage, but it really depends on on you as an applicant. I think a lot of it would depend on how much you were able to accomplish and when you figure out you want to do medicine in college. Like, I went into college knowing that medicine was going to medical school was my goal after graduation. So I streamlined my curriculum and I did all the activities that I thought would help me get there and help me figure out if this is really what I wanted to do. But if you're someone who figures it out later, then I think taking some time off to explore the field would be helpful.
These next two questions are for Ms. Diaz and Ms. Compa. How many medical schools did you apply to, and how did you prepare for your interview?
I applied to 16 different schools, and the interviews now are the multi-mini interviews, so it's really difficult to prepare. I think that a lot of your personality comes out during that time, and how genuine your interest is in medicine for the right reasons just naturally comes out. Also, how strong of a leader comes out naturally in that type of setting. I only did multi-mini interviews, but I think that it's really difficult to prepare for that. In some ways, it gives you a lot of peace because you just have to go and say, there's nothing more I can do except just be myself. And I think that you can really get in your own way during interview day if you overthink it. You just have to believe in why you want to do this, know that there's nothing else you want to do, and that will come across as anything, as just being genuine. And I think that that's what they're really looking for rather than the exact right answer, because you don't want to sound canned.
So I think you should listen to Rose because she actually scored a perfect score on her MMI, which I don't know that she knows, but I know. So I applied to 30 medical schools. I have, my numbers were not great. My GPA was low, my MCAT was low. So I had to apply pretty broadly. I interviewed at only 3 programs, and I knew that the reason I interviewed at these programs was because of my diverse background and diverse perspective, and I knew that that's what they valued. So I confidently went into these interviews because I knew there was a reason that they chose to interview me, and it wasn't because of my scores, because that was a non-issue. So that being said, the way that I prepared is I spent a lot of time, probably before, even while I was working on my application, just trying to figure out, what is my story? Why do I want to do this? How is it that all these decisions that I've made leading up to this point have actually come together quite nicely, where I'm moving in this kind of stable, consistent direction? And one thing that I discovered is, what are my morals and values? Why are these things important to me? And going into my interview, I was able to articulate those very clearly. And I think that some people get caught up in kind of over-talking or overthinking, and it's okay to keep things simple. And to be able to just talk about why you want to be there and to do it in an effective and efficient way, I think that's very important.
This next question is for Mr. Poblete. Did you know, or do you know, which specialty you want to get into? And do you think this would enhance your application or help you along the way?
So I'm keeping a pretty open mind, but definitely the things I did before going into medical school, we've been talking about this a lot in the non-traditional panel, having to kind of remodel yourself into kind of think, how do you prepare for medical school? How do you kind of learn about the field? And my remodeling process, I really done a lot of work with a lot of infectious disease doctors, actually. So I volunteered in an STD clinic, in an LGBT clinic, and then I volunteered at I worked at the Department of Public Health, where we did HIV clinical research. So, for now, I'm really interested in infectious disease because that's just what my experience has been. And I talked a lot about those experiences, and I didn't say this is what I want to do, but I definitely had conversations with interviewers about, I could totally see you going into infectious disease or public health. I think you should just focus on what you're passionate about, and then keep an open mind, because I'm keeping an open mind. I'm pretty open to, falling in love with any specialty of medicine at this point.
This is for all the students on the panel. Compared to your undergraduate education, how different is medical school, and do you have time to do extracurricular activities or research?
I'll start. I think that being a mom, I was able to balance things a lot better when I was doing my prerequisites and even during my master's program. But medical school for me was a whole different ball of wax. It consumed me more than any of my other previous studies had ever done, and it has been a very humbling experience. The people in med school, the other students, they're very brilliant. Some of the most brilliant people you'll ever meet. And so I think that some people are naturally brilliant and other people are hard workers. And when I got into med school, I found myself more and more as clearly a hard worker. And people would just understand things, and it was like magical to me that they didn't have to review it. So it's a very humbling experience, but at the end of the day, there's a certain joy in doing what you've always wanted to do, and going to a class and realizing how many people would love to take your spot in that class, and learning about the physiology and body in a way that people would love to do, and you have this brilliant opportunity to do it. So I think it's been humbling, but it's also a very unique and wonderful gift to be able to study that hard and understand things at that level.
So I went to a predominantly liberal arts college, Rose and I, since we both went to the same college. And my experience in undergraduate was vastly different than my experience of the curriculum in medical school. I was also one of those people who got in because I'm a hard worker, not because I'm brilliant. I've learned to be brilliant, but it's been a tough road. So I was just somebody in undergraduate where I could study whatever the night before, and I would walk into the test and I would do just fine. And in medical school, I found myself trying to do the same thing, and it just wasn't working over and over again. So I really had to get stringent on a study schedule. I would wake up at 6 in the morning, I'd review for my classes, I'd go to class, I'd get out of class at 5, and I would study till midnight. And that's what I did day in and day out. And that's just what I had to do to get over that hump, over that past hump. And I found the same thing for our steps, where I just had to study a whole lot more than some other people just to get that score. And so that was just my journey, and might be the journey of some other people in the room. Hopefully not.
So I think for me, I went to Berkeley for undergrad, and I thought that medical school was hard, but I didn't think it was harder than undergrad. And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that our school is pass-fail system, and it made the collaboration really helpful in the study process. The other thing is, I feel like as a medical student, since our class is small and the faculty gets to know you really well, and I feel like I was very supported throughout my medical education, which made the process a lot easier. And kind of going back to the question, there is definitely time to do things outside of the curriculum, and I think the pass-fail system really helps you with that, in the sense that you don't have to score 100% on your tests, and you could use that extra time to do research, to go to student-run clinics, to do the surgery program that we were talking about earlier. But there's a lot of things that you could do outside of school.
My undergraduate experience at the Naval Academy was pretty demanding, because you incorporate the academics and then also physical and the leadership aspects of the training to become a military officer. But medical school so far has been even more challenging, purely from the volume of material we have to learn. The common saying is like drinking from a fire hose, and I've definitely experienced that. I did pretty well at the Naval Academy, and at UC San Diego, I'm merely average. But after looking around all my classmates, I'm very happy to be average amongst that group of classmates. So studying has been a little bit of an adjustment for me. I've had to put in more hours. But at the same time, just like Yen has been saying, there's a lot of other activities as well. I'm taking beginner medical Spanish, also participating in the free clinic that a lot of the UCs have. and then also participating in the ultrasounds, trying to making a feeble attempt to sing in a singing group that our medical school has as well. So the way I'm looking at it now is work hard and play hard. There's a lot of academics, but there's also a lot of other things, worthy things to do to pass your time.
So I was a social science major, so medical school is completely different. And it's, this is my second month now, so it's actually a lot of adjusting to kind of figure out how I learn in this setting versus the setting that I was successful in before. It's been a lot of really hard work, I think compared to my post-bac experience versus this, it's not something you can't do, but it definitely takes up a much bigger part of my day than I ever did before in school. I also think that the resources are different. So I went to Berkeley as well. And I remember, being in a class of 700 and having, being in a lab with one instructor and like one microscope for every 4 people. And then suddenly you just have all these resources and all these like faculty walking around. And that definitely helps. Like I can learn things a lot faster now. But the material is, I think I was kind of trying to estimate the material we've covered in like the first 2 months is probably what I covered in a year of my post-bac. So it's really, it is very difficult, and you have, it takes adjustment, but the pass, no pass definitely helps. And I also think you have to remember that if you're, when you're in medical school, you're with a lot of very bright people. So a lot of us are used to having gotten like A's, and nobody's expecting you to do that anymore. It's pass, no pass, and it's not, a lot of the schools are unranked now. As far as doing things outside of school, I actually think it's necessary. You can't just study all day. Like actually last week I injured my hand and I couldn't go to yoga, and I noticed that my productivity, like study productivity that week was just shot. So you have to do things for self-care and to remind yourself why you're banging your head against the wall for 15 hours a day. So.
This question is also for the panel. If you could be an undergraduate student again, what would you do differently?
I guess I'll start. I actually don't think I would do anything differently. Obviously I kind of changed careers, and I suppose I could have been pre-med all along and have finished this like years ago, but I do think that what I did made me the person that I am, and without those experiences, I think if I had gone into medicine, it would be in a completely different way. I actually don't think I'd do anything differently.
I don't think I would have done anything any differently either, because despite finding the vocation of medicine so late in life, I've also had some other really great experiences, and actually my classmates and the people I'm lucky enough to work with, we all enjoy sharing all these different experiences we've had on our road to medicine. I don't think I would have done anything differently in undergraduate.
This is not going to be very helpful for you guys, but I don't think I would have done anything differently either. I think the experiences that they described were just awesome experiences, but I'm at a place exactly where I want to be right now, so I think I wouldn't have done anything different.
I'm going to do something different. I would do something different. So something that I think I didn't understand very well until I actually got to medical school was how to take care of myself and how to prioritize myself. I come from a big Mexican family, and the priority in my family is everybody else. It's really not to prioritize me. And so, and one of the gifts of medical school has I've been able to learn how to say no to things and how to say, you know what, I just really don't have time for that. And it's actually a great thing. And so something that I would have done differently as an undergraduate is I wouldn't have worked as much as I worked, because I was working a lot of hours, probably about 40 hours a week. And I think that it definitely took away from my time with the academic material. And something that I always advise, because everyone who's pre-med gets wrapped up in, well, I have to do research and community work and all these things. I have to do all these things because I'm going to fill out an application. They're going to want me to check all these boxes. And I actually don't think you need to do all those things. I think devoting yourself to one or two things and doing them well is much more important than overextending yourself and having your grades suffer. So one thing I wish I would have done better, I wish I would have spent more time focusing on my grades and my studying, and less time focusing on my work stuff, which I enjoyed, but in hindsight, it would have been great to have some of the material really nailed down before I got to medical school, because I had a real steep hill to climb.
I think that I'll speak to at the point at which I started doing prerequisites to get into med school. I think that I would give myself the advice to control what you can control, because there's a lot of things in the medical school process that are out of your ability to control. So in the classes where you can do well, you work as hard as you can, but you may encounter a teacher that maybe is unfair or maybe doesn't like you, and those types of things happen. I think I got really wrapped up into, well, this isn't fair, and I think that in general, there's a lot in life that is not fair, and so as long as you do really well in the classes that you can control, if you get the occasional B or whatever, it's not the end of the world. You just do what you can. And in preparation for the MCAT, even if you're a good test taker, you really never know how you're going to do on that test. It may come as a surprise that you don't do as well as you think you do, even if you have previous experiences doing well on standardized testing. So you just have to go in with an attitude of being able to do well in the classes where it's in your control, and forgive yourself when it slips out of your hands, because you're building a big picture application and you don't have to obsess about every single grade being a solid A.
This question is a little bit more specific regarding applications. Commander Shu and Ms. Diaz, would you please tell us how many letters of recommendations you submitted, who did you ask, and what the process is for asking?
I had a lot of letters of recommendation, and I was very fortunate because I had different work experiences, and I was also an EMT at a local hospital. And so what I landed up doing was letting the person know way and ahead of time that I was interested in med school, with my eye on the prize of asking them for a letter of recommendation like maybe a year later. And so I just try to really plan it out. And then when the point came where I asked a physician with whom I worked for a letter of recommendation, he had already known what my dream was, and so he was prepared for that. I think the advice I would give to people is definitely don't wait till the last minute. Do it from someone who's going to take time to write a letter, and you want to avoid someone who's writing a lot of letters, because a lot of them just do block style letters that are not personal to you. So even if they're a big name in research or a big name at the university or may have ties to admissions committee, it would be better to get a letter from someone who's going to personally write about you and put yourself in the position of reading this letter when you have a pile of other letters to read. So you want to choose someone who maybe is not as big of a name, but who really knows you and will make your name stand out as someone they want to meet.
I took what some people might consider a bit of an interesting approach to getting some letters of recommendation. I was fortunate enough with the people that I did ask to where they knew me very well personally, both as a student and as an employee and also as a volunteer. But I actually would make bullets of everything to remind them in case they were very busy, because most of the people who will write you a good letter will be very busy. So in 2 cases, I actually wrote out bullets to remind them, and then also just to pimp them a little bit for some of the experiences that we'd shared and that maybe would look good in a letter. And in one case, a gentleman was so busy that I actually offered to write him a draft of the letter, which he took and modified from there. So I didn't feel like it was anything necessarily really too bad, but it did help them, and it probably also helped me a little bit for the content of the letters I did have. So respect the time of the people who are going to make the sacrifice to write you a letter, because it takes a lot of time. Don't forget to remind them about who you are, because they might have maybe 300 students that they're trying to help out, and make it easy on them if you can.
As we all know, it's really difficult to get clinical experiences, that hands-on clinical experiences. What advice would you give our attendees to getting a valuable clinical experience that's not just cleaning beds? Just to the whole panel. Go.
Well, I think there are some people in the panel who might have been in a admissions committee who maybe can talk about the admissions committee perspective on this. But I think the most important thing that I wanted to make sure that I came across in my application is that I know what I was getting into, and that I know what medicine's like, and that I know what the difficulties and rewards are in medicine. So I think you can do that in all sorts of ways, and you don't have to be, doing surgery or doing procedures on people, or being, you can do that just by watching somebody. I think it's important to do that. I definitely prioritize making sure that I could show that I've observed physicians doing their work. But I also think doing something that's not necessarily clinical, but that's health related and shows your passion for the field, and also your particular passion within that field. For example, I did HIV prevention research, which I was really interested in, and I was able to talk about passionately when it came to my application. And I volunteered in an LGBT clinic, which is also something I was really passionate in. I was able to talk about passionately in my application, and those things I think those things are more important than being able to, put your hands on patients.
When walking into a new environment, it really helps to be, first of all, approachable and punctual. Also be very attentive. And then once you've gotten to know people and they've gotten to know you, then maybe you can express interest in doing a little bit more if that's even within the latitude of the program that you're in. So by putting in a lot of time and effort and being very polite, you will become a trusted member of that team, hopefully, and maybe they'll let you do a little bit more afterwards within the bounds of the program.
Sorry, so the question is, how do you get exposure to clinical?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I think it really depends on where you are. I think at Davis, at least, or in this area, there are the student-run clinics where you can get very involved, and I think I see some members here that were a part of that. Also, there are opportunities to shadow physicians, and I would highly recommend that as well. And a lot of that would just be being assertive and emailing people and being okay with getting rejected from some of them. And so I think those are good experiences to be a part of. And the other thing is, if you participate in clinical research, a lot of times you will be able to shadow the physician or your PI that works either in the hospital or in the clinic. So that could be another avenue to get clinical experience in there.
I think as medical students, you have to learn how to be assertive, and you have to learn how to get the most out of your time. So even as a third year, you're in medical school and you're here to be trained to be a physician, but there are times when if you don't make yourself known, then the team can kind of forget about you and really not teach you or not include you in things. So I think as a pre-medical student, it's really important to understand how to do the things, like how to gain trust from the people that you're working with, and how to ask for what you need. So even if your role, the only role that you can find is as a volunteer in the hospital, to really, there's doctors around the hospital, and to start talking to those doctors. And I know that there was a volunteer in the MICU when I was on my MICU rotation, and we were all kind of bored, and I was like, what are you doing? You want to hang out with this patient with me? And she kind of looked at me and was like scared. And I said, you have to be able to take advantage of those opportunities, because she was obviously volunteering there for a reason, but didn't have kind of the courage to say, yeah, I really would like to learn something about these patients, and this is why I'm here. So I always encourage people to be bold and to be brave, and to be respectful, and to gain the trust of the people that you're working with. But they will really give you any opportunity that you ask for. If someone likes you, they're going to go above and beyond for you to make sure that you get whatever it is that you're trying to get out of that experience. So even if you are a bed changer, there's doctors that are around the beds that are being changed, and to say, I'm a pre-medical student interested in medicine. Are there any opportunities outside of bed changing amazing for me to shadow people. And I think that especially in a teaching hospital, most people are going to say yeah, and sometimes they're jerks. And that's just the way it is. And then you move on to somebody else. But definitely don't get discouraged and keep asking, because you might encounter someone who, like me, who's really nice, and I'll teach you a lot.
I think that that's great advice, and also just about being on time and being the kind of person that they want to rely on. I said that I was an EMT, so I got to work in an emergency room. But I think it's also important not just to look at clinical experience as something you're going to list on your application, because you'll find that when you actually do fill out your application, there may be things that you dedicated and poured tons of hours in, and you've just got to summarize it up in a certain amount of words. So look at your clinical experience as, instead of something just to list on your application, as an opportunity for you to realize, do I really want this? Why do I really want to be a doctor? And also consider no work beneath you. I mean, there's no body fluid that didn't touch me when I was in EMT, and you just can't turn your nose up at anyone or turn your nose up at anyone or any job, because people watch you. When they see you do things with compassion and you do things with a lot of purpose, then they ask you to do more and then a little more. And you will self-promote yourself just by being a caring and respectful employee there in a setting. Even if you start out with something as a menial job, don't be discouraged by it. You'll find that you can promote yourself to a very high position quickly when people see they can trust you.
Is there a specific experience or person that has inspired you to go into the field of medicine? And did any of you have any mentors?
There's a friend of mine who worked for the CDC, and we happened to run into each other in a different type of interview process in 2003. And he is an infectious diseases doctor, and he's currently working in New York City. But I've had an opportunity to follow him around at the San Francisco VA and watch him do his rounds. And over the years, just as a physician, even though I wasn't quite as far along in the path to become a doctor, I always stayed in touch and let him know about my experiences. And as I've been applying through medical schools, he's definitely been there as a really good support as well. So I really owe a lot of thanks to him, both as a just as a role model and someone to help motivate me through example of all the neat things that we can do within vocational medicine.
I think, in a lot of the things I've done to prepare for medical school, I've met a lot of really generous physicians who, a lot of times I don't even some of them I haven't even had to seek out. They kind of ask me what's going on, give me advice, and they make it really easy for me to kind of get mentorship. Sometimes you don't really have to work hard at it, because for a lot of physicians, they see it as part of their responsibility and as something they want to do. So I think being open to that and taking advantage of opportunities where you share something with someone. Like in a lot of these situations, a lot of times I came into the situation not necessarily looking for something, but because I was passionate about that particular project or passionate about serving that particular community, and then we had something in common, and they kind of see me as somebody that I don't know, perhaps they see me as somebody who, as a member of their community, and it might be easier to approach somebody that way. But I wouldn't be scared to talk to people. I think that a lot of people like doing it. We're all here because we want to be here and help mentor people, and presumably we'll continue doing this when we graduate. So it's a rewarding experience to mentor someone. So it's not just you taking. It's something that a lot of people want to give you.
I have to mention real quickly, and just in a different type of way, but Yen actually has been one of my mentors, in that when I had the opportunity to participate in the UC Davis PreMed surgical internship program, he took time out of his busy day to help us learn how to suture. And I'll hopefully have the similar time or similar opportunity to do the same thing for some pre-medical students as I'm moving through med school as well.
Thank you. And now I'm blushing and stuff. For me, I think the cool thing about being in medical school is that you may find opportunities to meet really important and mentors in your life, even when you're not expecting it. I remember that I always thought I wanted to go into general surgery. But when I was on my pediatric rotation, I had one patient where a patient that was hit by a car and had significant facial fractures. And the consulting service was the ENT service at UC Davis, who one of the attendings, when they were rounding, saw that I was taking care of the patient at that time, and allowed me to go into the reconstruction surgery for that patient. And I remember months later, he ran into me in the hallway and was like, "Oh, this patient is actually coming back for a follow-up. Do you want to come see the patient with me?" And I was already on a different service at that time. And he really got me involved into gave me a lot of insight into the specialty. And so now I'm going into ENT and head and neck surgery. So that's kind of cool.
So, it takes a village. And when I say that, I mean that I literally have a village of mentors. And the reason that I have those mentors is because when I was probably a first-year undergraduate student working at UCLA, and there was this woman that got up in front of a group of people and she spoke, and I was like, who is this woman? She is amazing. I want to be just like this woman. And she ended up being a very dear friend to me, and probably the most influential person who encouraged me to go to medical school. She's a radiologist at UCLA. I don't want to do radiology. We don't have much in common aside from the fact that we absolutely love each other. And so what I learned from that experience is that actually physicians love to be told how great they are. And they don't mind if you watch them speak and then you walk up to them after and say, "Hey, you're doing something that really impresses me." Or, "Hey, just the way you carry yourself has really impressed me." They'll be like, "Oh, let me get your number." And all of a sudden you have a mentor. And so I really, have continued to do that and have collected these people who have helped me all along the way. They help me with different decisions that I make, and they all serve a very different purpose as a mentor, but they're definitely equally important. And I always encourage people, you want to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody and ask them. At this point in my career, I'm trying to figure out what residency programs to apply to, and I feel happy that I can pick up the phone and call somebody and ask them, where do I apply? How do I apply? What should I say? Is this appropriate to talk about or not? And I think that's something that kind of collecting this armoire of mentors will definitely help you for in the future. So I encourage that.
One of my mentors was at the community college level when I went back to school. I think I had a lot of self-doubt. And I showed up to my classes, but I didn't really tell people that I was pre-med at my age, because in my head, I was always questioning, could I really do this? I'm a mom, is this crazy? And I think that just I told one professor, and just starting to speak the dream out loud and to start telling people makes it real. And I told one professor what I wanted to do, and he just simply told me, "You got this stuff." And I don't know why I'll always remember him telling me that, and it launched me into a place where I stopped doubting myself. And I started to really talk to people, and I'm gonna go to med school, and it became more real the more I talked about it. I also had an experience that really inspired me, and that is running a marathon. I had grown up as a very obese child from a family where obesity is prevalent, and it got to a point where I was well over 250 pounds, and they didn't even carry my size at the store anymore. And so I got to a point where I was going to decide whether I was going to lose the weight or not. And going on that journey and losing over 100 pounds and then running this marathon, it filled me with a spirit that I could do anything. Because even getting into med school was not as big of a deal to me personally as battling that weight. And so it pointed out that sometimes our biggest hurdle is ourselves and the voice that you may have in your head about why you won't get accepted or why you may not be able to do this. You have to really be able to hear that voice so you can directly address it and really tell yourself that you can do it, and keep in mind the stories of people who have gone before you and overcome things, and you can also do it, that too. You become that story. Just keep talking out loud and making it real.
And for our last question, I would like to ask our medical students if you could give us one piece of advice regarding undergraduate education, the application process, or medical school.
Attack everything you do with passion. I already said it a little bit earlier, work hard, play hard. There's balance in everything as well. So work hard, play hard, and have passion, and you will hopefully reach your dreams.
I would say know why you want your medical degree, because there's lots of positions in healthcare, and people will ask you why you want an MD or a DO, and you have to know why, and why you're not pursuing a PA, and why you're not thinking of a nurse practitioner, because that motivation will keep it very clear why you're going down this path. Because there's a lot of opportunities to doubt yourself and wonder if it's worth it or if you'll ever get there. It's a very, very long road. And so I think just to know why you want your particular degree so that you can answer people and you'll stay motivated knowing what you want and why you want it. Why is a very important question in med school.
My advice would be never to stop asking for help. So all along the way, maybe you fly through undergraduate, maybe you don't. Maybe you're going to fly through the admissions process, maybe you won't. But at some point, every single person in this room will hit a roadblock, and they're not going to know how to get around that roadblock. So I think it's really great to always be comfortable asking the people that you trust to help you get through that roadblock, because all of these things that we encounter as medical students or as doctors, it's a very great skill to be able to ask your neighbor or your colleague and say, you know, how would you approach this? Or do I have the right diagnosis? And it's something that you see in the hospital all the time. So it's great to start practicing that as soon as possible.
I think one quality that probably a lot of us have in common is that we live in the future a lot. Like, we're always planning and thinking about what's next. So my biggest advice is to take a moment and sort of ground yourself in the present and really think about, why are you doing this? Is this something you want to do, or is this something you love to do, or are you just doing it because you think you have to do it? I think that's the biggest thing that I need to work on, definitely, is enjoying the moment and kind of making sure that I check in with myself and I know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and kind of appreciating that and not always just thinking about the future. I think especially when you're a pre-med, that's really easy to get caught up in just thinking about the future all the time. So just take a breath and kind of focus on your feet and the ground that it's on, and just kind of think about like what the present is like sometimes.
So I agree with what everyone else is saying, but maybe more on the logistical side, my biggest advice during the application process is to try to have your application ready early so that you can submit ideally on the first day. You really want to be in that first pool of applicants when you submit your application. So good luck, everybody.
I would like to thank our panelists for being here and for truly inspiring us. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you.